Welcome back, guys. We're now in drifting toward disunion. The United States begins to split into two countries. My name is Dr. Chris Erskine, and we're going to jump right into this lesson. And I want you to look at this first slide. 1854. Now, if you remember from the last chapter, we looked at this slide as well. And we left off about May 21 of 1856. May 21, 1856, Lawrence, Kansas is sacked. It's burned and destroyed because you remember bloody Kansas. People from Missouri came in and they voted for slavery. Remember, we got a thumbs up and a thumbs down, and they voted for slavery. Now, the very next day, and I want you to look at the next slide. The very next day, we have two senators. One is from Massachusetts, named Charles Sumner. The other is from South Carolina, and his name is Preston Brooks. Now, Sumner is giving a speech in Congress about Preston Brooks's uncle. And this is what the speech says. I'm going to read this to you. Please read along with me. In May 1856, Charles Sumner, Republican, remember Republicans are against slavery, was nearly beaten to death with a cane. And this is the speech he gave. Not in any common lust for power did this uncommon tragedy have its origin. It is the rape of a virgin territory, compelling it to the hateful embrace of slavery. The senator from South Carolina has read many books of chivalry and believes himself a chivalrous knight, with sentiments of honor and courage. Of course, he has chosen a mistress to whom he has made his vows or married. Or, though ugly in the sight of others, is always lovely to him. Though polluted in the sight of the world, is chaste or good in his sight. I mean the harlot, slavery. Now, this is an important speech because if you notice on this slide, there's some words that are bold words. Now, those words are bold because it's really intended, the speaker, Sumner, wanted to convey the idea of sexual imagery, because so many slave owners bought their slaves specifically so that they could take them as mistresses or have children with them. And the women, of course, have no choice. The slave women would be what we call today in the United States the Me Too movement, all of these slave women. And Sumner gives this speech, and Preston Brooks is angry. He goes to his friend and he says, I want to challenge him to a duel. So they will stand together in a field, they will walk 10 paces apart and then shoot each other with a gun. And one shot only. And if they miss, it's over. And if someone hits, then someone maybe will die. And Brooks's friend says, no, you cannot challenge him to a duel because dueling is only for gentlemen. And Sumner is not a gentleman. He is scum of the earth. And so you must deal with this in another way. And so Preston Brooks goes into the Senate building where they make laws. And he takes his cane and he beats Sumner with his cane, and he breaks his cane. And Sumner his political career is ruined, and he almost dies. And many people send Preston Brooks a new cane in the South because they're so happy that he finally has stood up for Southerners and for pro-slavery views. And this is how violent it had become. We have bloody Kansas on May 21. We have this beating on May 22. And on May 24, John Brown, who we saw a picture of in the last slide, with his sons, goes to Kansas And on May 24, he kills or massacres 5 government officials. So we have May 21, May 22, and May 24. And those are in 1856, so all right back to back. Then in 1857, and this is a big, major court case in American history. We call it the Dred Scott case. Dred Scott was a slave, and he traveled with his master to states that were not slave states, Illinois and Minnesota. They're free. Now his owner passes away, he dies, and Dred Scott now claims that because he's living in a free territory and his master has passed away, he claims that he is now free. And so this raises the question, can a slave owner bring his slave property to a non-slave state, and can he still own slaves? We don't know the answer to that, because this is what the Supreme Court said. The Supreme Court said that Dred Scott cannot even bring this case to court because Dred Scott is not an American citizen, and only citizens can take cases to court. And so we don't even know the answer to whether Dred Scott could be property in a free state or a slave state, because he was not a citizen. Then in 1858, another congressman, now we have 2 more congressmen, and this one is Galusha Grow from Pennsylvania, and he goes up to Lawrence Keitt from South Carolina, and he calls him a Negro slave driver. And Lawrence Keitt responds and says that Grow is a black Republican puppy. Puppy is a small dog. And what do you think happened? Keitt reaches down to strangle Grow with his hands, and they start fighting, and there's this major fight in the Congress until one man, he grabs the head of another man and he reaches back to pull and punch him, but when he pulls the man's wig off, and then everyone starts laughing and the fight is over. But this is another incident, another episode of violence in the United States. And so now we move up to 1860. Remember, Buchanan is still president. Buchanan doesn't want to do anything about slavery. He's a doughface. Lincoln calls him a doughface. Looking at the next slide, it says 1860. Much of the North is behind Republican ideals. They don't want slavery. Lincoln is elected against 3 other candidates, none of whom were inspirational, or none of whom kind of got people that were against slavery to go and vote. And so Lincoln accepted, like Buchanan and other presidents, he accepted that slavery was constitutional. But he also said that we should not spread slavery into new territory. So he would have voted against slavery in Kansas, but did not try to end slavery in South Carolina. And so when he's elected, the slave states are so angry because they believe that the Republican Party is out to end and to take their slaves away. And so the North, one man stated, has got so far toward being abolitionist as to elect a man who is avowedly hostile to our institutions. And so it's 1860. President Lincoln, or candidate Lincoln, is elected in November, and the South is angry, and we've been building and building and building. It's like a pot of water on the stove, and it's continued to get hotter and hotter and hotter. And finally, what is the boiling point? At what point does it explode? And that's what we're going to talk about in part 2 of this lesson. So we'll see you next time. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.